हृदि निरन्तरं भासते स्वयं लिख्यते कथम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जता पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम् देहं मृण्मयवत् जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तदभावशुद्धिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भावतः कोऽहं भावयुतः कुतो वरधिया दृष्टात्मनष्टात्मना सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं Namo Ramana. In this, the Thursday Satsangh from Ramanacentre Center for Learning. As usual, we will be reading from the work Guruvachaka Kovai. We will be reading 2 verses. Each verse reading will be followed by a short meditation on its meaning, and that will be followed by a practice session of Atmauchara for 10 minutes. And after these 2 segments of verse reading, meditation on its meaning and practice of Atmauchara are completed, there will be summing up remarks by our President, Dr. Sharadaka, and that will be followed by an offering of Sri Ramanastotram by Vaibhavji and Pratna. We begin this evening's satsang by taking up the first verse selected for us verse number 206. This is in the segment investigation into the truth. The other two segments being meditation on the truth and experience of the truth. In investigation into truth, the subsegment we are going into is Shiva Puja. Shiva Puja, verse number 206. Once you have reached the intellectual understanding of non-difference, in which you know that the beautiful forms which are deemed to be eight are the forms of God, our Lord, then all our worship offered in an appropriate way to them is exalted Shiva Puja. This you should know. Upadesha Undiya, verse number 5 is translated and presented to us. In Upadesha Undiya, Bhagavan says, worshipping any of the eight forms, thinking that all the eight forms are forms of God, is good worship of God. The eight forms are five elements: the sun, the moon, and the jivas. So this verse of Guruvachaka Kove is an expansion in one sense of the verse in Upadesha Undiya, that is, Ennuru Yavum Irai Uruvamena Endi Vadipadal Undipara Isanar Pujane Undipara Ashtamurti Brith Deva Pujanam. Now, once you have reached the intellectual understanding of non-difference, in which you know that the beautiful forms which are deemed to be eight are the forms of God, our Lord. So, the basis for finding that all the eight are only forms of God, in this verse, the basis is said to be the intellectual understanding of non-difference, that there is no difference between one and the other. There is no difference really. The differences are only illusory or only appearances, and there is no reality in these conditionalities or differences that appear in the consciousness. So the entire creation, for the sake of convenience or in one sense, is divided up into these eight. That is the five elements: earth, water, air, fire, and earth, water, fire, air, and what is the other?
Earth.
Sir?
Sky.
Akasha. The one which is nirlipta, which is unattached to the others, is obviously left out. So the five elements plus the Surya and the Chandra, the sun and the moon, and the jivas, it is said, the jivas or the jiva, the one who is the worshipper, all the eight put together are all forms of God. There is no difference. As there is no difference, in one of the Girivalams, when we were discussing this, three of us were discussing Upadesha Saram. We had spread over 2-3 months. We had done 3 Girivalams, traveling to Tiruvannamalai and fortunately we could keep the continuity. 10 verses in each Kirivalam we would discuss. In the first 10 verses we have this verse number 5. So when we were meditating on this verse, that is Ennuru yavu irayuruvamena endi vazhipadal undi para Isanar Puchane undi para. When we were meditating on this verse, we were somewhere between the Bangalore curve and Adiyannamalai. Therefore, if all that we see, all that we hear, all that we taste, all that we touch, all that we smell, if all that is only God's forms, because in Ulladu Narpadu, one of the ways of looking at Ulagam is nothing but the Panchendriyas, the forms that are brought in by the Panchendriyas. The eye form, the sound form, the taste form, the fragrance and the touch. Now if all that and the Surya who allows the seeing of all these forms, creation of all these forms during the day, and the Chandra who allows the reflected light of the sun to be available and reveal these objects during the sun's going to the other side. All these plus the Jiva, the perceiver, all these are nothing but Arunachala. Then why should we call this as platform, that as road, that as lamppost? We came to the point that if all the 8 forms that we have perception of are only of one God, then let us call it as Ramana and keep only holding that one name and going. So, from that way of worship that the verse had pointed out, we came to the next verse, that is Japa. How proper worship in the senses allows us to come to one name of Japa. We suddenly came upon that if the Ashtamurti Brij, all the 8 forms are only forms of God, then where is the need to call him by different names as 8 different forms? It is enough if we call them as one. So what we did was, for long kilometers, though the eyes were bringing in different data, ears were bringing in different data, the smells were different, we held the one Nama. Ramana, 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 Ramana. We actually practiced the meaning of the Ashtamurti Brij Deva Pujanam to the extent we could understand. To the extent we could understand then that if everything, all these 8 forms which we call as earth, water, fire, air and Akasha are all only one, then does it not make sense to call them all as Ramana? And we came to Japatattva, which was the next verse. Uttamastavat Uchamandataha Chittajam Japa Dhyanamuttamam. So the whole principle of Japa came from proper worship. If the divisions of the senses and the Surya and the Chandra and the various worshippers are not seen with a differentiating eye, are seen as one substance, then we come to the meditation of one, the meditation of one Nama, one name, which stands for all of that. And Uttamastavad Uchamandataha, better than the loudly spoken chant, is that chant of the Japa, which is held with the lightness of touch of the lips alone. And even better than that is that Japa which is just done in the mind holding itself with the Nama alone. Ramana, 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 like Sudarshana Chakra, the Ramana Nama is held, but still it is objectively held, still worship is there. We worship all the Ashtamurti as one Nama. And we had come from worship to the Nama Japam. And the Shiva Puja, we come so beautifully to the same point. What is Shiva Puja? All the 8 elements that we can perceive are all nothing but Shiva. Are all nothing but Shiva. When we understand that, in explaining this verse, any one of the 8 forms can be worshipped, is what is said. That is what comes down to japa. If you hold one of the elements in one of the names, and Shiva can be the name. Shiva stands for the bliss, the happiness, the mangalam. The other day, we had gone to a Narasimha Swami temple because the team in which we were present had visited the temple, and the Ashtotram was chanted for Narasimha Swami. And one of the namas in the Ashtotram was Om Shivaya Namaha. You will find that in all the Ashtotram, perhaps, in one of the namas will be the name of one of the other deities, because that is how it is all designed, to point out that they are all one. There is this incident where T.K. Sundaresh Iyer, in his 34th or 35th birthday, sitting beside Bhagwan, he is in a mood of despondency. And Bhagwan asks him, why are you so despondent? And he says, oh Bhagwan, I have been coming to you from my 15th year of age, and I have not had a single spiritual experience. Many say they have seen this, they have seen that. I have not had a single spiritual experience. That is making me despondent. Now in Atma Vicharam and in Bhagavan's presence, the sense of progress itself will be defeated. There is no sense of progress in the stay in Bhagavan's Sannidhi. There is only the sense of being. But what kind of being? That being which is beyond the Ashtamurti, beyond time and space, beyond everything. Your existence is untrammeled by any other. That existence is where Bhagavan's Mauna takes. So many of the sadhakas in Bhagavan's presence, in many years they say, we have not had any experience. We have not felt any progress. We seem to remain where we are. And somehow that thought gives T.K. Sundaresh Iyer a despondency. And he expresses it to Bhagavan. And Bhagavan says, oh, that is your worry, is it? And gives him a look. And T.K. Sundaresh Iyer goes into a trance. And in that trance, he is given the same darshana as given to Tyaga Brahman, the Tyagaraja Swamigal, whose Aradhana was there a few days back. What darshana of Rama Pattabhishekam was given to Tyagaraja Swamigal? The same darshana is given to T.K. Sundaresh Iyer. And see, the beauty is to perceive the godly form, you yourself should become as subtle. Unless your consciousness is subtle, unless the drishti is divya, there cannot be any seeing of the divya rupam. So where does the bliss come from? The bliss comes from your own subtlety. The subtlety blessed by the Guru. T.K. Sundaresh Iyer is in that bliss, is in that Atma Ananda. And in that bliss, he is having the darshana of Rama Pattabhishekam for 2 hours. Everybody has gone out for their lunch and they have come back. And T.K. Sundaresh Iyer comes out of his reverie, out of his trance, and Bhagavan says, oh, did you have the experience you were seeking? And he says, go and get that Arunachala Ashtotram. And Arunachala Ashtotram is brought. Bhagavan points out to, see what is the 94th or 95th, I don't remember which name. See the 94th name. Keep that as a reference only. It could have been 96th or 97th of Arunachala. The name is Om Shri Pattabhiramaya Namaha. That is why to many devotees who would ask, should I worship Shiva or should I worship Vishnu? Should I chant Gayatri mantra or should I hold this mantra? Bhagavan would say, each of them is efficacious because all of them are only of the one. But you should hold on to one. You should hold on to one. All of them are equally efficacious, but you should hold on to one. Would be the Upadesham many a time from Bhagavan. For those who are interested in holding the Ashtamurti as one, doesn't matter whether you hold it as Narasimhaswamy or as Murugar or as Shiva, but you should hold it as one. And how I would reason out in my sadhana period was that our energies are limited. It is like the sparrow trying to empty the ocean. So if we dissipate it between 2-3 objects, already that energy which is small is now divided up into many objects of worship. That's why Bhagavan would say, have one object of worship. And that principle comes through here, that the Ashtamurti is actually only one. Is actually Ekam. Call it Pattabhirama, call it Arunachala, call it Ramana, but call it one and hold it. That is Shiva worship. That is the worship of Shiva, where all the forms made up of combinations of these 8 elements are nothing but Shiva. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. From the worship of 8 elements, one comes to the holding of the Nama, and that takes us to the Atma. When many ask that I am still holding on to the worship of the form of God, Bhagavan says, hold it with all Shraddha. That is more than enough. That will take you to the Atma in due course. So the worship of Shiva in this verse is that all the beautiful forms, the combinations that we see, which seem to pull us out, which makes one more attractive than the other, and the attention is divided and taken towards one and kept away from another. That process should be removed by considering all the forms as forms of Shiva, as forms of God. That is the best form of worship. Ashtamurti Brut Deva Pujanam. It is the best form of worship. That worship of worshipping Ramana alone is enough. Ramana is taking care of everything. All my life he has been there with me. All my outside activities, we can so clearly see how little the ego is doing, how much Ramana is doing for us. There is no need to think about what effort we have put in, but there can be so much meditation on how much Bhagavan is doing for us, how much God is creating for us to exist, for us to hold Him. There, our effort becomes negligible, and we merge our efforts into that of Bhagavan. And there, He allows us that vision, that Divya Darshanam, that everything is He, that everything is Ramana. That brings us bliss. The Divya Drishti, the Divya Darshanam, that takes us to the Atma Darshanam. Because the what is, Ulla Purul, can it be Atma or can it be Anatma? The Ulla Purul, that which is, has to be the self. It cannot be the non-self which is perceived. Therefore, the worship, the japa, the dhyana will bring us to the Atma. That is the teaching of Bhagavan. With Bhagavan's immense grace, with a true understanding and reverence for the outside, which is all the form of God, with true reverence and surrender to that God, one can turn inward. When everything is God, where is the need to choose? Where is the need to say this is better than that? Where is the need to say this circumstance is better than that circumstance? When everything is God, one can go in and ask, who am I? Can I be apart from that which is everything? The who am I takes one to the source and makes us one with the Atma Swarupam, which is the Atma of Ramana, Atma of Ishvara. With Bhagavan's immense grace, with due reverence to the Ashtamurti, that everything is the form of God, with due reverence to that, let us turn inward. And when a thought arises in another name, let us say, for instance, what is going to happen tomorrow? Then that tomorrow, what is going to happen, is all only Atma, which is perceived as another. So let us not get carried away by the other and ask, for whom is this thought? For whom is this thought as to what is going to happen tomorrow? This thought is for me. Who am I? Takes us to that one consciousness, the Atma Swarupam. With repeated practice, Bhagavan assures, the culmination of all worship, the culmination of all meditation, the culmination of all vichara is here. One rests in the Atma Swarupam. One gains this ability to rest in the Atma Swarupam as all the vasanas have been destroyed with vichara. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice of Atma Vicharam, which has come through the understanding that everything that we perceive is only Ramana. Everything that we perceive is only God. In that assurance, we can turn inward and hold this hand. Let us practice for 10 minutes. Revathi, you can set the time for us. Namo Ramana. We go on to the next verse selected for us. Verse number 1168. 1168. That is in the segment Experience of the Truth. The Anubhava, in the experience of the truth, this is in the Sat segment, the greatness of those who are wholly self. The greatness of those who are wholly self, the Atma. Verse number 1168. Because Mukti, liberation, is nothing other than attainment of Swarupa, the Jivan Mukta, the liberated one, shines in the state of the self, either in association with Siddhis, supernatural powers, or separated from them. The greatness of a Jivan Mukta will be misapprehended when Siddhis alone are used as the yardstick instead of the truth. You should know that those ignorant ones who esteem Siddhis will not know the greatness of the Jivan Mukta. The subsegment was the greatness of those who are wholly self. 1168. Because Mukti, liberation, is nothing other than attainment of the Swarupa, the Jivan Mukta, liberated one, shines in the state of the self, either in association with the Siddhis, supernatural powers, or separated from them. So the key factor in the Jivan Mukti is to abide in the self-luminous self. Everything else is lit by the self-luminous self. Everything else happens in the triad of experiencer, experiencing, experienced. The Siddhis or supernatural powers or any power happens in the triputi of experiencer, experiencing, experienced. Whereas liberation is Akanda Atma, is the self-luminous self, where the triad of experiencer, experiencing, experienced, all combined as one in this Purana I, which also quietens itself into the self. So the only mark that one should have for liberation or for the jnani is the ability of oneself to go to that Swarupa in the jnani's presence. Go to Bhagavan's Sannidhi, you pray, and that prayer is yielded. This is the experience of many devotees, that many of their prayers and many of their relationships with Bhagavan is through praying in critical times and those prayers being answered. This is there, no doubt. But what Bhagavan is saying here is, though Bhagavan's Sannidhi is there, is now in accompaniment with that great Siddhi of the Ishvara Siddhi itself, of granting prayers wherever they are suitable for one's spiritual progress. And I have heard many devotees say this, that Bhagavan has continuously come to their help in their prayer, and their journey in Bhagavan has been from one prayer to another. But then, where is the finality? What is the mark of seeing Bhagavan as a Jivan Mukta is to abide in the self, into the self-luminous self, and not remain at the Siddhi level. So, the the jnani may have jnana accompanied with siddhis or not accompanied with siddhis. But the greatness of a Jivan Mukta will be misapprehended when siddhis alone are used as the yardstick instead of the truth. Now, what happens when the prayer is met by Bhagavan is that when a similar question is asked about Sai Baba to Bhagavan, about Shirdi Sai Baba, there is a question to Bhagavan. Shirdi Sai Baba seems to be giving lot of material benefits to the devotees also. So is it not taking one away from the Atma? Bhagavan would answer, he is not only giving them the answer to their prayer, but unknown to them, he is also giving a push towards the Atma, a push towards the self, self-luminous self. This is something beyond comprehension. Therefore, that devotee who is reliant on his relationship with Bhagavan for sanction of prayers will slowly be moved by Bhagavan towards valuing only the Atma, the self-luminous self, and slowly the prayers will drop off. But those in Jnana Marga are now cautioned by this verse, since in Jnana Marga we don't use terms like devotion, like Bhagavan taking care of our journey, and in Jnana Marga the responsibility is on the consciousness within. Here there is a direct caution not to go after the siddhis of the jnana, because if you value the siddhis, then you will get sidetracked. The greatness of a Jivan Mukta will be misapprehended when siddhis alone are used as the yardstick instead of the truth. You should know that those ignorant ones who esteem siddhis will not know the greatness of the Jivan Mukta. So even when a prayer is answered, when somebody who is in the COVID bed and we together pray, seems as though he has reached the other side, but somehow there is a turnaround. And what should be our attitude to that? We should quickly thank Bhagavan and start doing Atma Vichara again. For whom is this miracle? For whom is this miracle that there has been a turnaround? There has been an answer to the prayer. To me, who am I? And go to the Swarupa. Go to the self-luminous self, which is beyond birth and death. Where in Bhagavad Gita Sara, Bhagavan says, Ahamatma Gudakesha Sarvabhuta Shayastitaha Aham Adischa Madhyamcha Bhutanam Antayevacha. I am the Atma within all the Jivas. I am verily the beginning of all beings, all creation. I am the beginning of all creation. I am the support of all creation. I am there after the end of all creation. Bhutanam Antayevacha. That Atma which has no birth and death, that Atma which has no creation and destruction or maintenance, that is the Swarupa. That is where one is asked by the Sadguru, by Bhagavan, to reside in. Be the Atma, be the Swarupa, not something that happens in that Srishti Sthiti Laya, not be carried away by extension of life in body for one with a prayer. Of course, there is gratitude to Bhagavan, but quickly what he has asked us to do, to go beyond the birth and death. What is subject to birth will be subject to death. Jatasya hi dhruvor mrityu, dhruvor jannam mritasya cha. This one should clearly understand and not make a hue and cry when birth is or existence is continued. or some other miracle happens. But one should go beyond the birth and death into the Atma, into the Swarupa, which is the real Siddhi. What is the real Siddhi? To go beyond birth and death and abide in the self-luminous self is alone the Siddhi. So that alone should be the mark of the Jivan Mukta. That alone should be the mark where the sadhaka should remain satisfied. Should never be carried away even by a miracle that happens in front of him, but continue the journey to go into the self-luminous self. With Bhagavan's immense grace, which lays things out so clearly to us, let us hold the Atma, let us hold the Swarupa with effort, so that all the vasanas which cause effort will be wiped and one will be able to effortlessly reside as the self. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit and practice for 10 minutes. Revathi, you'll set the time for us. request our President, Dr. Shartaka, to give us the summing up remarks.
Namo Ramana, Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. This is the concept which Bhagavan is taking us to so beautifully in these two verses that he has highlighted for us today. The search for siddhi, the search for achievement in Ulladu Nalpadu, Bhagavan tells us that all achievements are like mere dreams. Pira siddhi elam soppanamar siddhigale, he says, they are just like dreams, because what happens when it is over, when one wakes up, that is no longer existing. There is an incident of a devotee, or rather a lady who had heard of the greatness of Bhagavan, and like Kisa Gautami, she brought her dead child to Bhagavan, asking him to revive the child. And Bhagavan spoke to her just like the Gautama had done, the Buddha had done, and he spoke to her and made her understand the transience of all things and that one must accept it. And he persuaded her to go back with that peace in her mind. And after she left, Bhagavan was questioned by some of the devotees. Is it possible for a Jivan Mukta to revive the dead? Then Bhagavan said, yes, it is possible. It is possible. But is it the purpose for which they have come? In Ramana Gita, we find that in the last chapter, it is called Siddha Mahimanukirtanam. Amritanatha will ask Bhagavan, what is the capacity of a Jivan Mukta to perform siddhis? And Bhagavan says they are equivalent to Shiva. Shivena Sadrisha. They are like Shiva, they are Ishvara. All siddhis are possible. All boons can be granted by them. Bhagavan also in that episode, he said jokingly, if I start reviving the dead, Ramanashramam will become a graveyard, nothing else. There will be only dead bodies strewn everywhere with requests for bringing them back to life. So the purpose for which they have come, is that the purpose for which they have come? What is the purpose? To grant that highest siddhi. As Bhagavan says, that alone is siddhi. Siddhamai ulporulai terndirttal siddhi. There is no other siddhi. But at the same time, as Nandakumarji also said today, Bhagavan is absolutely compassionate. So he allows for all our weakness. He allows for the bhakti to come to its fruition in jnana also. He allows for our desires to be fulfilled. So in the very same Ramana Gita, in the chapter 16, 2 chapters before the Siddha Mahimanukirtanam, where bhakti is talked about, as always, Bhagavan begins the chapter by saying that self-abidance only is true bhakti. Swaswarupa anusandhanam bhakti, says Adi Shankara. So that alone is true bhakti. But then gradually he says, what if somebody does not have that self-abidance? Then a continuous stream of bhakti will lead to that. Then if continuous stream of bhakti is not there, intermittent bhakti is there, that will become continuous in course of time. What if one has desires while praying to God? And the last 3 verses, Bhagavan, I just remembered that when Nandakumarji was talking about the fulfillment of desires by the Great One, here Bhagavan says, the devotion of one who practices it for the fulfillment of a desire does not end on its attainment. He says, if the Supreme One, if Bhagavan fulfills our desire, then our love for Bhagavan does not end with that. He continues to be devoted to God. And again he says, faith in the Supreme begins and develops. That's why the desires are fulfilled for us. At a point, then afterwards, it will cease to matter whether the desire is fulfilled or not, and only the Supreme will matter. So he says the devotion growing thus becomes complete in course of time. By such complete and supreme devotion, one crosses the cycle of births and deaths in a like manner as one would by knowledge. So that supreme devotion will come where there will be no seeing of differences, when everything is seen as Ramana, when everything is seen as Shiva. Bhagavan tells us about the glory of the state when he says, அண்ணாமலையாய் அடியேனை ஆண்ட அன்றே ஆவியுடற் கொண்டாய் எனக்கோர் குறையுண்டோ குறையும் குணமும் நீ அல்லார். And again in Padikam he says, Veli veli teenir manpala uiral. You're everything. That Ashtamurti breath he describes in Padikam, and he says, if all this, if everything is you, where Yanarulan Vimala, how can I be apart from you? So that seeing that Shiva in all, and in the previous satsang also Nanda Kumarji meditated on this concept of, if you say all, then you cannot be excluded. Vasudevam Sarvamiti means you cannot be excluded. So when you see Bhagavan in the Ashtamurti, what happens? Then you are not excluded, and then the oneness happens. And what actually is the problem with the mind? What is the mind? Bhagavan says in Upadesha Saram, he says, Manas, Prittayo Manaha. Manas means vritti. And what is the meaning of the word vritti? Vritti means movement. So the nature of the mind is to move. If it stops moving, then its nature is sublimated or it is destroyed when it stops moving. So how does it, where can it move to? It can only move if there are differences, if there is a duality, if there is one and another. If there is no other, where to will it move? If everything is Ramana, where to is the mind going to move? If something is Ramana and something is not Ramana, it may choose between Ramana and not Ramana. If something is good, something is bad, it may choose between the good and the bad. It may make wrong choices also, but it has an option. But if everything is only Ramanamayam, then where is it going to move to? And when it does not move, it begins to abide in its natural state, which is achala, which is thira, which is got no duality, therefore no movement. So it comes to that point of devotion. And that is where Bhagavan draws us, whichever way we go, he draws us to that Eka Chintana, which ultimately leads to the Eka Chintana of the Ekam Aksharam, that which does not change, that which does not move, that from which one cannot move anywhere, and by which one is absorbed by that very grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramanaka.
Namo Ramanasa.
Namo Ramana Vaibhavji. May we have the chanting of Ashtotram?
Namo Ramana. Bharatvaj Vishwanath Virachitam Sri Ramanashtotara Shatanamavalihi Apar Satchit Sukhavari Rashe Yasyormi Matram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Hridchintayami. Om Mahasena Mahom Shena Jataya Namaha. Om Sri Ramanaya Namaha. Om Gurave Namaha. Om Akhanda Samvidakaraya Namaha. Om Mahaujase Namaha. Om Karanodbhavaya Namaha. Om Jagadhitavatāraya Namaha. Om Sri Bhuminathasthalosthitaya Namaha. Om Parashara Kulottamsaya Namaha. Om सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः। ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः। ॐ सहायाम्बा सहायवते नमः। ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः। ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः। ॐ श्रीमद्द्वादशान्तमहास्थले लब्धविद्योदयाय नमः। ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः। ॐ तीव्राय नमः। ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते नमः। ॐ पितुरादेशतः शोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः। ॐ तपोमयाय नमः। ॐ उदासीनाय नमः। ॐ महायोगिने नमः। ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः। ॐ कुशाग्रधिये नमः। ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसंरम्भाय नमः। ॐ सुसन्दृशे नमः। ॐ सवित्रे नमः। ॐ स्थिराय नमः। ॐ तपक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः। ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः। ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः। ॐ चूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ॐ चूर्णिताखिलविभ्रमाय नमः। ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः। ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः। ॐ त्रिगुणातिगाय नमः। ॐ विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः। ॐ विराजदचलाकृतये नमः। ॐ उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः। ॐ पूर्णाय नमः। ॐ रचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः। ॐ गम्भीराय नमः। ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः। ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणस्य निभाय नमः। ॐ धीराय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ॐ स्वराजे नमः। ॐ महर्षये नमः। ॐ भगवते नमः। ॐ ईड्याय नमः। ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः। ॐ विमलाय नमः। ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः। ॐ आप्ताय नमः। ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः। ॐ समदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्याय नमः। ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः। ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः। ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः। ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः। ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ॐ दयार्णवाय नमः। ॐ श्रीशोणाचलहृद्भूतस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः। ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेष्ट्रे नमः। ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः। ॐ गणेशमुनिभृङ्गेन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः। ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्नसंशयाय नमः। ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः। ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः। ॐ सौम्याय नमः। ॐ आत्मवते नमः। ॐ सर्वावनिमतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः। ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः। ॐ महाभागाय नमः। ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः। ॐ विनताय नमः। ॐ विनुताय नमः। ॐ विप्राय नमः। ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः। ॐ दर्शनादगसंहारिणे नमः। ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ॐ ऋच्चान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः। ॐ स्मरणाद्बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः। ॐ संसारार्णवतारकाय नमः। ॐ शोणादृशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः। ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः। ॐ अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः। ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः। ॐ कमण्डलुधराय नमः। ॐ शुभ्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः। ॐ गुहाय नमः। ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः। ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ॐ भवरोगविषग्वराय नमः। ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः। ॐ देवतमाय नमः। ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः। ॐ सेनान्ये नमः। ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमण भगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनाम पूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थानोररुणाचलस्य पदयोः स्मृत्या जनिं प्राप्यत दिव्यानुग्रह सुप्रवाह विवश स्तादात्म्यभावं गतः हृन्निष्ठस्वगभीर नित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनास्येकराट् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नम इदं लोकोत्तर ज्योतिषे। ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
Namo Ramana Guruji.
Namo Ramana, sir. Namo Ramana.